So we get to announce right now that I just recently, I'm here every 2 weeks, right? I recently recovered from COVID, very mild case, my second time through. First time was 2020. And so grateful to God that wasn't too bad. Now I'm through all the quarantine and clear now, but the policies for the diocese is the first weekend back, I won't be part of distributing communion. So if you're wondering, why is Father not distributing communion? You will receive communion if you're prepared for communion, but we'll have 4 people doing that. And Deacon Paul is not here because he's gone for a couple weekends. He's not sick or anything. He's just on vacation. So good for him to be able to take that time off. I have a few analogies for us today. And they're about how St. Paul said, at present we know partially, and then we shall know fully. And at present we see indistinctly, but then we shall see fully. These are part of his closing words in the second reading today, and that beautiful exposition on love. This idea of knowing and seeing is not simply about accumulating knowledge, but coming to understand the ways of God. Likewise, this seeing fully is not simply being able to see more with our eyes, but that of seeing more with our hearts in being of one mind and one heart with Jesus. Ultimately, which is brought to perfection when we are one, completely united with God in heaven. But here's the analogies. So our gospel today ends kind of in a funny way, how they're driving Jesus out of the town and want to throw him headlong down this hill. And when I was in the Holy Land with my class a few years ago, we visited this synagogue where Jesus was, and then sometime later that day, our teacher, our professor, Father Dennis, told us that we're going to go on a walk, and we're going to go to the place where Jesus was driven out. And he didn't tell us that the walk was going to be 3 miles up a very high hill. And so we didn't really expect that. I was capable of doing that, but there's some other guys in my class who weren't so keen on doing that. And once they figured it out about halfway through, weren't very happy with our teacher. But he kind of did that purposefully to show that we don't always know what's ahead. We don't always know what's coming. But what's there when we reach the end is that fullness. It was a great, beautiful view, one of the best views in the whole Holy Land, and it was well worth the trek up there. Second analogy is recently I had lunch with my brother and sister-in-law and my nephew, their boy, Joseph. And as we were beginning lunch, Joseph is starting to ask the why questions. Now he's just past 3 years old. He's asking a lot of why questions. And out of the blue, he had this question for everybody at the table. Why are we only eating carrots? Because he knew that at my brother's land, in the summer, they have 4 acres of all kinds of vegetables. Beautiful. And they keep a lot of them in their root cellar. And they have trees, dozens of trees with hundreds and hundreds of apples and pears. And he says, why aren't we eating pears? He just couldn't understand what is going on that we only had carrots. Now there's also pasta, but he was thinking about the things that he knows they could eat. And so the idea was that, well, we don't eat it all fully right at once. We don't eat everything, right? He doesn't know about buffets yet, but it's not all there. And I told him, well, this is just what we're eating, Joseph. And my brother said, well, I eat whatever Mom puts on my plate. And then she looked at him and said, no, you don't. And so, but that was, some good enough answers for Joseph at the time. But we saw that desire to know why, what is going on. And there's a big difference between him, who doesn't really have the ability to reason, and those other people at the table. Kind of like St. Paul said, when I was a child, I used to think as a child, act as a child, reason as a child, but when I was a man, I put away childish things. St. Paul talking about this growth in faith that happens in the life of a Christian on this path to perfection. This whole reading is about this path to perfection. Third analogy, this is a quick one. This is about seeing. So the first two were about knowing. So I was looking, when I was in quarantine, my parents have some hunting land, so that's where I did my quarantine at the cabin. And I was walking through the forest searching for deer antlers, because it's a time where the deer are shedding their antlers around this 1st of February. And I couldn't find any. I was looking, and I was reflecting on this reading, how we see very, very partially, right? And I was reflecting on how God is seeing me going through the forest, and how God, is probably smiling at me like, hey, just 10 feet away, there's that nice 10-point rack of, But I was smiling, like, yeah, that could be the case. I might have passed by some, and God knows. I was praying, Lord, please guide me if it be your will. But if it's not your will, okay. This is still a nice walk to appreciate the beauty of your creation. So that's seeing partially, right? We are limited. And the last analogy is how when we look at the stars, if you ever look at the sky, it's good for us to look up instead of looking down all the time. Sometimes there's clouds, right? We can't see past the clouds. And then sometimes it's clear skies and it's beautiful, but there's still light pollution, right? If you get really far up north or far west, whatever it is, and you can see those millions of stars, it's amazing to be able to look. But even as we look at those millions of stars, we're only seeing part of the story. We're only seeing partially. We don't see like that new telescope that's going out into space that's going to be able to see 13.7 billion years back. We just see this small part of the universe. But God holds all things in his hands, right? God, the creator of all, who gives everything existence, sees that in the present time, in the moment. So just an exercise for us to dive into this a little more. I'm going to invite you to, well, first, question, who here looked in a mirror today, this morning? Anybody looked in a mirror? Quite a few people looked in a mirror. So here's a pop quiz. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And we're going to use our human ability to imagine, which is a great gift that we have. Imagine yourself, look at yourself today. What do you look like? What clothes do you have on? If there's writing in your clothes, what does it say? How does your hair look today? Can you picture your face? Maybe a little personal. Can you see the marks on your skin? How many hairs are on your head? Maybe somebody zeroed, but how many hairs are on your head? Who do you see? Who do you see? Do you see a beloved child of God? Okay, you can open your eyes. How'd you do in the pop quiz? Okay. All right, I think it's kind of hard to do that sometimes. James, in another letter, in the letter from James, he says, those who peer into the perfect law of God and then later go away and fail to carry it out, and the perfect law of God is that of love God and love neighbor, are like those who look into a mirror and after looking away, promptly forget what they look like. This idea of the mirror. But if we were to go back and do that again, and we could just think about that now, we don't have to do it. We have this great capability to think, to imagine, to picture, to reason, but even then we're limited. Yet in the moment, right now, we don't have to wait for God to fully know us, for God to fully see us. We are on this path to perfection, this journey to unity with God, to be saints someday. That's the goal. But before that even happens, right now, God fully sees us, fully knows every aspect of our hearts, the deepest secrets of our hearts. He knows us better than we know ourselves, better than we could possibly know ourselves. And he loves us fully. We are on this path to being able to fully love in that union with the Lord. But now, God fully loves us. And that is a fact in the present right now. And think about the hair, right? There's another verse, probably familiar. Every hair on our head is accounted for by the Lord, who knows us and sees us and loves us fully. And that's a beautiful thing. That's just as St. Paul says, at present we know partially, but then we shall know fully, and I didn't say this line, but we heard it, as we are fully known. As we are fully known. That is true right now. At present we see indistinctly, and he says, as if in a mirror, but then we shall see fully as if face to face. And that is what heaven is described as, the beatific vision, seeing God face to face, which is only an analogy. All analogy is imperfect for describing the fullness of life with God in heaven. We see glimpses of each. We see glimpses of seeing God, the goodness of the Lord. We have partial knowledge of the Lord, and if you have a prayer life, you even know him personally in a partial way. And we're able to love truly as humans. We can will the good of the other, especially by the God's grace. We can love with God's love, but we are imperfect in that still. If we act out of love, we will never regret what we do. St. Augustine says, love and do what you will. As St. Paul says, love never fails. So we have that, yes, it's already, but not yet. We are on this path to perfection. And that should give us hope. That gives me hope to know that I'm at a professor. I think I've said this here before, but I have a professor who would always say, we're no done muffins. We're no done muffins. There's no such thing as a done muffin until you're in heaven, in a sense. In the meantime, though, Jesus gave us, in memorial of his love, he gave us the Eucharist, a pledge of our redemption, a pledge that all this will be possible. And along the way, he gives us that grace to continue to transform us, to continue to help us know him, to continue to help us see, to be of one mind and heart, so that our hearts may begin to beat with the heart of Christ, which ultimately is perfected when we are united with the Lord in heaven. May God bless you and keep you in his loving arms.